Hello and welcome to the latest 1904 Club podcast episode from the Hull Daily Mail. No Prutz today. He's still recovering, I think, from Cheltenham, and then the League Cup final on Sunday. I think he got celebrating with Antor Deck and Alan Shearer. So today it's me and Kathyrn and Burnsy here. Burnsy, how are you?
All right, thank you. It's nice to be back. I've missed it, so it's good to be back for a chat.
Oh, and Fletch is in a dormitory somewhere. Kathyrn, how are you?
I'm not bad, thank you. As you've already mentioned, I've got like a less exciting background today. I've not got the Telegraph office greenery behind me, unfortunately.
Just for those that aren't listening, that are listening and can't see, Kathyrn's last week she was in the Telegraph offices, and there was loads of trees. It was, it looked like Centre Parks. It was really nice. Today she's got a magnolia wall with a picture of Dean Windass on the back of it,
which some people could say is actually an upgrade on the greenery, depending on what you think.
Yeah,
and the Beatles crossing Abbey Road, by the way.
Yeah, although you can only really see John from there. If I move my head, you can see the rest of them. But when I've got my head in, you can only see John Lennon.
Yeah, and Burnsey's just got some curtains.
That's right. It does look like a big photo booth. I'm getting my passport picture taken.
So let's first of all, we've got loads of things to cover on today's episode, but let's start with the draw at West Brom, which it's one of those, isn't it, guys? I guess it was, for me, it remains an absolutely brilliant point when you factor in all the players unavailable. West Brom, their position in the league, how good they've been, particularly at home in the last few weeks, and City's wretched record there that I think their last win was in 2008, 7 straight defeats, I think. So to have got a point there, I thought was an absolutely fantastic result, especially having gone a goal down, Burnsy. But then you look at results elsewhere and you see Cardiff win at useless Blackburn, who they're doing nothing for anybody at the minute, and then Derby go 2-0 up at Plymouth, 2-2, and then they win the game, and suddenly that 5-point cushion is back down to 3. So in some respects, it feels like the result that City got probably won't get the credit it deserves normally because of results below them. But it was a bit like Bristol City in a different kind of way. It was such a battling, gritty performance. And then to go 1-0 down and come back and get something from it. And they could have won it at the end as well through Abu Kamara, Lincoln as well. Yes, West Brom had their chances. So, but a really good point, though, don't you think?
Oh, I thought it was an excellent point, and I think they deserved a point. I know West Brom looked good in the first half, and I know they hit the bar in the second half. But City hung in there and I thought they had a really good second half. Started the second half well, had the bulk of possession, went 1-0 down. I like that right back, by the way. I was impressed with him for West Brom. And fully deserving of it. The only, as you say, the only disappointing thing is that you're thinking after the midweek win, you're thinking, well, the moving onwards and upwards, they're going to leave the likes of Oxford behind them, and then you look at the table and think, hold on, Oxford are above them. It's that sort of thing. It's like you're on a floor of treacle in your socks trying to escape. And you can't quite do it. I was thinking, well, they'll be heading for mid-table obscurity, but they're not there. They're still in the battle. But the good thing is, to me, they don't look like a relegation side now. I couldn't say that earlier in the season, but they don't look like a relegation side. They look well organised. They're playing football. They're coping with the problems that are being sent their way, or self-inflicted, whichever way you want to look at it in terms of suspensions and what have you. And they look a decent side. And I did get a little carried away in the first half at West Brom on Saturday. We'll maybe talk about later. But I was sort of saying, well, you think this side looking good, get the players back next season if they can stay up, etc., etc. And you maybe look forward to a challenging at the right end of the table season next season. But then I had to caution myself and say, you're getting carried away. They're not out of this yet. And then you look at the league table now and you think, they're definitely not out of it. And credit to Derby. It's obviously the Eustace effect proving his worth. Blackburn are sort of not finding the form, whereas he's gone in at Derby. And what is it, 3 straight wins for them? And they're shaking it up. But other clubs are picking up results. So it's hard to call. I'll ask both of you in a minute. What's the magic number? Because I can't decide which is the magic number in terms of what you need for the safety margin. I've waffled on enough, Kathyrn. Welcome back to the 1904 club for me. What did you make of Saturday?
Again, I think it's a huge point because I think I'd said before the game, if they could go to West Brom and get something, it would be a really good run of 4 results, win those 2 home games against relegation rivals. And then if you get a point at 2 playoff looking teams, that would be fantastic. And they've kind of done, I don't think they could have done much more in those 4 games. It's just unfortunate that teams around them have started to pick up points as well. And Derby winning those 3 games in a row, you're almost, it's a weird time now with the international break coming because you feel like City are on a good run and it's kind of like, does the international break disrupt their momentum? However, I almost feel like maybe did we need it a little bit for some players to get a bit of, breathing space? Had they kind of gone all out in that West Brom game to make sure they got a point? And does the international break actually disrupt a team like Derby, who probably wanted to continue on their good form? Same with kind of, Oxford, who've just got the first win in about 9 games, I think. Suddenly they can't build any momentum because they've got a week off. So it'd be interesting to kind of see how that affects clubs coming back into it. But in terms of Saturday, I was really impressed with the way that they came back into the game, because we kind of said after the Oxford game, it's quite rare that they go a goal down and actually come back and get something from it. And as soon as West Brom went ahead, I kind of thought, that's probably it now. If we kind of push forward, I can see them going down the other end and getting a second. But fair play again, Casey Palmer coming off the bench and making an impact once again with the goal. And again, an impressive battling performance away from home.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like when you factor in the 2 away performances, away at Bristol City, team challenging in promotion, very, very strong at home. City got an awful record there as well, and they had the setback of Jal's red card after 15 minutes, hung on for a point, and altogether different occasion at West Bromwich Albion, but they still found a way to get a point. And I think that is that grit, that determination. I spoke to Tony Mowbray after the game in what was one of the longest post-match press conferences I've ever been in, at nearly 30 minutes, he was very complimentary about City, and he just said, that they don't look a team that are fighting relegation. They look a well-organised, well-drilled team that are fighting, and that's exactly what they are. I mean, that's fans would say, well, that's the bare minimum we expect from our team every single week. But in the context of the season, everything they've gone through, all the problems they've had, they are, as Ruben says, they are competitive, and I think, if you think back to the Cardiff game where they dominated it but lost without ever looking like scoring, they've come back from that. They've had 2 home wins, 2 very good points away. That is the 1 defeat in the last 7 games now for City, 4 unbeaten. So I guess, as we've touched on, the really kind of frustrating thing, and Burnsy said it brilliantly, walking on a floor of treacle in your socks. That is what it is, because for all the good stuff, for all the battling, the couple of wins, the battling performances away from home, they're only 3 points clear with 8 games to go, and they're still in the mire. You kind of think with the form, the way they've played, because they played well, and the results, that they would have kind of got themselves a 6 or 7 point gap now. But because of Derby's good form, and as you say, Burnsy, as much as it pains me to say it, give them a bit of credit, they've mixed it up a bit. But it is what it is, and they've got to keep. If they want to stay in the division, they were always going to have to win some games. We said it ages ago, didn't we? That they'd have to win. You said, I think, 4 or 5 wins, Burnsy. They've got 2. They've got 2. They're going to need 3/4 more at least. It's in their hands. But if they are going to stay in the division, they've got to win games or certainly keep their points tally ticking over, which is something they've been able to do. Kathyrn, in terms of points tallies to stay up, Burnsy mentioned this. What do you think it's going to take? I know you're peeing into the wind here because you've had seasons. Some teams have gone down. Peterborough, I think, with 37 points. Wycombe with 44. Birmingham went down with 50 last year. So every season is different. But what do you kind of think it's going to take?
I still think they need at least 3 more wins potentially. And I'm looking at those home games against Luton and Derby as 2 of them, because you could almost not quite condemn Luton, but I think if we beat Luton after the international break, that keeps them kind of with Plymouth a little bit, and then you start to think those two might be really struggling to get out of it. Obviously, the Derby game's a bit later on in the season, and then I think there's a few away games, Swansea, Watford, where you're looking at thinking maybe they could be a win away from home. I still think 3 or 4 wins potentially. So that's, looking at least 10, 12 more points from where they are now. A lot of it is going to depend on the form of the teams around them as well. It's just so hard to predict. Like I say, whether that international break disrupts Derby's momentum a little bit, you hope it does. But they could just kind of pick up, from where they left off. So I still think they need a handful of victories to make sure.
Just on that Derby point, they don't actually play until, the Wednesday, the 2nd of April, because Preston are involved in the FA Cup. I'd expect Derby to win that. It's at home, they've got momentum, and Preston, I think, it's the FA Cup quarter-final, isn't it? So that'll be a big occasion. They'll be full strength for that. They'll be going flat out. Whatever happens to Preston, that'll sap them, that FA Cup quarter-final. So I'd expect Derby to win that, even though they've got to wait to the Wednesday. And it gives him a lot of time to work with his team and get what he wants into him, Eustace. So I'm sort of feeling that it's an advantage. In terms of the points total, I've been sort of in my head working on the magic 50 points, because I can remember putting out a tweet at Christmas saying Plymouth needed 51 points to stay up. And few people having a go saying, rubbish, it won't be that many this season. But it might be. The way Kathyrn's talking, I agree. I still think they need 3 wins, which would take them to 50 points. And you would hope that would be enough. And when you put it, well, they've got to beat Derby, they've got to beat Luton. Those are the 2 games they've got to win. And then you think, right, 3rd win, where's it coming, etc., etc. And I've said all along, I wouldn't want to go to Portsmouth on the final day looking for a win. Now, the way they're playing at the moment, I wouldn't necessarily expect them to have to go to the final day, but you don't know that there is that uncertainty about it. Baz, where do you think, or have you seen a supercomputer recently or anything like that that suggests what the threshold is?
No, I genuinely try and avoid, unfortunately, stuff like that. Sometimes my hands are tied and we have to go. I'm sure there'll be something that pops up on the website over the next few days. I haven't yet. I did get sent some. A colleague at Betfred sent me some stuff this morning and saying that City basically are still odds-on favourites to stay in the division. I think because of the Derby result, it's changed them slightly. I think they've gone from 6% chance of going down to 7% chance only because Derby have won. But I think the smart money is still on them surviving. But it is tight. Look, you can't get away from the fact that, as good as City have been in recent weeks, Cardiff accepted that they still are, as we said, right in the mire. What I would say, and this is a good thing for City, is that a week or so ago, Portsmouth beat Leeds, and you think, Christ, they're flying. They were 10 points clear of the bottom 3. Suddenly, that's because of Derby's Luton winning and getting a win in the draw, Derby winning 3 in a row. Suddenly, that 10-point gap that Portsmouth had is now down to 4. So they're in it. You look at Swansea are only on 40, at the 16th on 44 points. So they're only 6 points above the bottom 3. And obviously City go to Swansea on Good Friday. So I don't know. It's incredible, really. Basically, you've got Swansea on 44, Portsmouth 42, Oxford 42, City 41, Stoke 39, Cardiff 39, Derby below the line on 38, Luton 35, and then obviously Plymouth down at the bottom on 33. And so we were talking before we came on about who is going to go. It's going to be Plymouth because their home form has been their rock solid thing. Well, they lost to Derby. Their away form's pointless. They're rubbish away. Luton have now dropped 4 points below safety. Should have beat Middlesbrough. Yeah, some of the chances that I watched the highlights, and some of the chances that Luton had against Borough were unbelievable. And they drew 0-0. I mean, Borough are flaky. You can't trust them. But that's a game they really needed to win. So they're 4 points adrift, and their goal difference is terrible. So you kind of think, based on what we've seen so far, it looks like it's going to be one from Derby, Cardiff, Stoke City, Oxford, Portsmouth and Swansea. I mean, take your pick. There's 8 games to go. Anything, as you say, Burnsy, the smart money is on Derby beating Preston, because Preston would have had the cup tie, against Villa a few days earlier, a bit like we saw with Plymouth at Man City. But you just don't know. It's the Championship. It is absolutely mental. And so you can try and predict. Go on.
Sorry, I interrupted there. You'd worry if you're a Stoke fan, because what have they, 1 win in the last 6? They're, Mark Roberts has not had the desired effect. And
lost in the 94th minute on Saturday as well, didn't they?
That penalty,
yeah.
Sickener.
You definitely worry about them. Ben Kennedy sends this to the 1904 club. Thanks for this, Ben. Without the blip at Cardiff, we've had some excellent form this last month, and the team probably going into the couple of weeks break with plenty of confidence. I think that's a fair thing to say, even with all the injuries. I can see us moving a couple of places up after the first game back. Up the Tigers, says Ben. And Lee Walker says to us, another fantastic point on the road. Big game against Luton after the international break. And James at Deoxyrib says, can Derby stop winning? Well, I think they've got the bit between the teeth, and I think we all think they'll win the next game, certainly at home to Preston. That's where we're going next.
Yeah, I think what I would say about City is they need to be. The Luton game is obvious that they need to win that. Whatever happens, if they beat Luton, they will go 5 points clear, because obviously, as we've said before, Derby don't play until the Wednesday night, so that could potentially put the pressure back onto Derby. We'll have to see, obviously, how results in the other teams play out around on the first weekend back. But as it has been throughout forever, it's the ball's in their court. It's their own destiny remains in their hands, and that's all you can ever, that's all you can ever really ask. They've got the advantage. They're playing. I'd be a bit more worried if they weren't playing well, if they weren't getting results, but they are getting results and they are playing well. West Brom were the better, probably just about the better team in the first half. You'd expect, with respect, given the players that West Brom had got, you would expect them being the dominant force at home as they were to create the chances. They did. They didn't take them. City have got. It is. I know every team at this stage of the season has their own sob story, but City's sob story is pretty significant with the players they've got out, and it will have an impact. The manager will not discuss it in the sense of he will not make excuses, and I hugely respect that angle. But it is a factor, and I thought they missed Puerta at the Hawthorns, that ability to get hold of the ball and create. They sort of lost that with Regan. Regan's a different type of player. But he'll be back for the Luton game, obviously, João. And also, we were really worried about João being out for the 3 games. Well, they've got through 2 of them, with 4 points, which you'd have taken probably even before he got sent off. You'd have said, I'll take 3 against Oxford and I'll take a point at West Brom, even if João Pedro had have been in the starting lineup. So I think that's a positive. Obviously, he will be a miss against Luton, but they know that they've got him back for Wednesday. And suddenly the Wednesday game, their home form is second worst in the Championship, only above City. They lost against Sheffield United. Chris Wilder's had his say and said their season's finished. City haven't got a great record at Hillsborough recently, but that's another game, albeit on a complete turgid pitch at Hillsborough, that you would suspect that City have got every case of going and get something from there. So I'm still really positive. I think it's hard when you're only 3 points clear at this stage of the season to get too far ahead, but I still think I'm seeing enough in the performances, Kathyrn, to think they will be okay. But me saying that and then going out after the international break and delivering that is another kettle of fish. If they lose to Luton, then they've got a problem, haven't they? But they've just got to keep ticking over, and what we're seeing is enough to suggest they will do.
I think so. I was just looking at the fixtures of some of the other clubs around City, and unfortunately, Portsmouth have got Blackburn after the international break, and Blackburn have been doing nobody any favours recently. Swansea have got Leeds, and Oxford have got Middlesbrough, and then Oxford plays Sheffield United. So that's a couple of difficult run of games for them. I think Stoke City had a bit of a better run in, but Swansea have also got to play Derby after they play Leeds. So one of them's going to drop points, or if not both of them. And it was the same situation with City playing teams around them as well. But my only concern for City's point of view of the international break is the players that are going to go away. We're talking about maybe, we needed a bit of rest and recovery in the legs. Casey Palmer, for example, has obviously not started a game since he came back from injury, but he's come off the bench twice and made a real impact. He's going to go away now with Jamaica. And, how much football he'll play, I don't know. But you worry a little bit about him coming back for that Luton game, how ready he's going to be. It's a lot of travelling. And he's still just building his fitness up. There's other players kind of going away on internationals as well. So you just kind of hope and pray that they all come back fit and healthy and are all ready and raring to go to play in that Luton game, because that's always the danger with international break, is that, players actually don't get the rest that they kind of need, or you hope that they do get.
Just on that point, you've sort of answered a question to the 1904 club, Kathyrn, from Flat Cap and Ferret. Casey Palmer says Flat Cap and Ferret. I take it wasn't christened as Flat Cap and Ferret. I'd have liked to have been at the service in the church with the little baby, as the vicar says, and we name this child, puts the water on the head. I don't know which religion that is. I've gone like a Dave Allen sketch here. We name this child Flat Cap and Ferret. But anyway, Flat Cap and Ferret says Casey Palmer is impressed with his substitute appearances. Where would he fit into the starting 11? Well, in terms of what you're saying about the international break, maybe the best we can hope for is on the bench coming back. But where's he, Baz? Where's he pushed for a place? Is it in place of Matt Crooks, or?
Yeah, I love Casey. It wouldn't surprise me if Casey decided to stay at home and just try and focus on getting his fitness right for City, because obviously he's not played for a long time. He had 3 months out after getting injured at Coventry before Christmas. He's just coming back. He obviously stepped off the bench against Oxford, had the impact for Joe Gowhart's equaliser. I thought he'd actually scored in the emotion of me going absolutely mental in the press box when we scored. I did think Palmer it was one of those where we were sat. It looked to me like he'd angled his header back across goal, and the goalkeeper Wildsmith had completely flustered it, and it looked like they'd all missed it and it got into the net. Obviously, Abu, and we'll come on to Abu in a minute. Abu scored. I really like Casey, and he's a match winner. He's got something different. He's got something that nobody else, I think, in the City squad has got. He's got that unpredictability that he can change a game. And when the trouble is with Casey, I think throughout his championship career, he's been the level. He's played, I think, 216 games at this level. Is that consistency, doing it week in and week out all the time. But there's no doubt on his day, Casey's a match winner, whether it's him scoring or creating a moment for somebody else. And whether he you'd have to say it'd be that 8/10 that Ruben likes, and Crooks has been that role. Although obviously in the last couple of games, Crooks has been deployed on paper at least as the centre forward in Pedro's absence. But actually they've been quite fluid, haven't they? At times Gowhart's gone through the middle. At times on Saturday, Burstow went through the middle. So they have got that fluidity. But look, what I would say is, whether he starts or he doesn't, having Palmer in the squad, fit and available, is something that few other teams at the bottom end of the league have got, because he can turn a game, and he's turned 2 games in City's favour. They were losing the game against Oxford. He got them a point at least, and on Saturday he got them a point as well. So whether he starts against Luton, I'm not too sure. But obviously, if he does stick around, I think that's really important for him. They've got a training game this week, an internal training game to give players minutes. If he stays around, he will play. You would think, playing that to try and get his minutes up.
And you're expecting him to stay around the way you're talking. You're expecting him rather than go on international duty.
Look, nothing's been confirmed yet, so I don't want to speak out.
Do you?
Say again?
You don't do that unless you don't pass up an international opportunity, do you?
Oh, no, but I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because you've got, as a player, you've also got a commitment to the club that pay your salary every single week, and if I don't know, what would you do? You've been out for 3 months. You're coming back. You've had a serious injury. You're coming back to fitness. you're not fully fit, your club's in a relegation battle, they really need you. Would you jet off halfway around the world to play a friendly or a game? I don't know. What would you do?
Well, Kathyrn, do you want to answer that while I consider my my thoughts about it?
It's difficult, isn't it? I think it depends what his relationship with the Jamaica coach is like, I suppose, and whether he says to him,
Still Steve McLaren.
Yeah, Steve.
Yeah,
Steve's got a whole connection. Surely Steve can come on. He's all right, Casey. Stay at home. I'm just looking at Jamaica's fixtures actually, and they play on the Wednesday, so he really would be late back. Think of the international break. England's game's on the Monday, so they've got a lot more time to recover. Whereas Casey would be playing on Wednesday, and then having to come back and be ready for the Saturday. I'm sure. Weather's getting a bit warmer over in Hull, I'm sure it's nice in Jamaica at this time of year, but it's a difficult one, isn't it? I'd love him to stay. Selfishly, I think it'd be much more beneficial for us rather than having him fly across the world and come back. But I suppose it very much depends on his relationship with Steve McLaren and what Steve McLaren thinks is right for him. I mean, it's CONCACAF Gold Cup qualification. I'm not sure where Jamaica are in that and how close it is. In fact, can have a look at they are second in their table at the minute. So
they're big. Look, they've got 2 games. They're both big games, and it's hugely important for any player to play international football. It's a massive thing in anybody's career. But for me, I just think when you're coming back from injury, ultimately it's up to the player to have a conversation with his manager. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think from City's point of view, they want as many players sticking around over the next couple of weeks as possible to stay fit and be ready for that Luton game. Go on, Burnsy.
I was just going to say to Kathyrn, nobody's listening to this. That's a bad story coming tomorrow, or Casey Palmer says no to Jamaica to stay with City, isn't it? There'd be a better headline than that. The whole Daily Mail subs are better headline writers than I am, but there's a bad story there. I think
if he did that though, and then he wasn't in the starting 11, he might be pretty annoyed. Because I'm sort of sat thinking, well, actually, is he better as an impact sub because he makes that difference off the bench? And I think earlier in the season, maybe when he started games, was when he was sort of in and out of the team, wasn't he? And I think some of his best performances have been coming off the bench and changing the game. But if he was to turn down an international call up and then not make the starting 11, you'd be pretty annoyed probably. So, but to wait and see, I suppose.
I'm saying nothing. I'm saying nothing. I'm merely highlighting. I'm merely highlighting what I potentially would consider if I was a player coming back from injury.
Sprinkling a little seed there.
Let's move on. Let's move on quickly. Oscar Zambrano. This is something we need to touch on because
we've got a question on this. Can I name check the Angel High says, have we an update on Zambrano?
On the subject of Oscar Zambrano, I'm glad that Angel High has got the question. So, yeah, he had his appeal heard with CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, on Thursday of last week, and we are told that decision is likely to be revealed by CAS to Zambrano and his lawyers this week, potentially early this week. So it's a watch this space. Now, I think the club have always felt that it might get reduced to a year possibly, but I asked Ruben about this on Saturday, and he sort of intimated that there's a potential that he could be back this season. Now, whether that's I don't know. I sit here now, genuinely don't know the outcome of it, but the fact that Ruben is hinting that he could be back before the end of the season. Now, that's not to say he will be back available for selection, but potentially back available to back to train or be around the squad. Because obviously, since the ban was handed down on Bonfire Night, which was also the night that City lost at Oxford, and also the night they lost Bellumi to an ACL injury, he's been back in South America, dealing with this with his family, trying to get his case with his lawyers in order to appeal. So it is in some respects, there's no real update in terms of whether he's going to be banned for the 16 months that he was banned for originally, whether it's been cut short, whether it's been written off and he can play on Saturday, or whatever. We're going to have to wait and see. But things are moving, and it is a case of let's wait and see. But I think, obviously it is worth pointing out he is still only on loan from Quito in Ecuador. But I do think the club would like to try and make that permanent if the ban is reduced. So it's a watch this space. Let's hope for him because he's 20, he's a kid. Let's hope that there's something that it gets reduced because it's a real shame to see a player miss 16 months of a promising career.
Talking of people that might be back possibly earlier than expected, Kathyrn, you spotted somebody at the Hawthorns on Saturday?
I did. I saw Louie Barry in the tunnel congratulating his City teammates as they came off the pitch after that point. So I thought, is he going to be back anytime soon? But I believe Baz might have an update on that.
Yeah, it sounds like he's motoring along in his progress back at Bodymore Heath. Obviously, Albion to Bodymore Heath to the Hawthorns is 5 minutes journey or so. So yeah, they're hopeful that they could get him back. I think it's like the initial fear when he did his knee at Sunderland was that was it for the season, and all the noises coming out were he's done, he's finished, another blow. But it sounds like he's making good progress, and that he could be back in and around the squad before the end of the month, early part of next month, which I think for everybody is a massive boost because I say Ruben has sort of said to me before, he'd written him off, that he thought that was it. He wouldn't get him back at all this season. So if there's any doubt, if there's any potential, way forward of getting him back sooner rather than later, that's obviously great news, given the fact they've got loads of players out already. Whether how soon he can come back remains to be seen. Obviously, it depends on how quickly he gets back to fitness from that injury. But the noises coming out so far are actually really positive. But the caveat being that at any point in your recovery from any injury, particularly knee injury, you can have a setback. And if he has a setback, it's going to delay it. So fingers crossed. But as it stands, as we sit here now, the outlook is a lot more positive than it probably was, 10 days, 2 weeks ago.
It's a shame because when he picked up that injury against Sunderland, it felt like he was having quite a good game at the time, and he was maybe just starting to settle into the team. And I thought it took him a couple of games to sort of find his feet a little bit. So it kind of felt really cruel that injury came in that game when he was looking really bright and lively. So if they could get him back before the end of the season, I think that would be a massive boost.
Yeah, absolutely. The more attacking options they've got, going into the final weeks of the season, because as we know, they don't score a lot of goals, and that has been and is the problem, and is why they are where they are, because they don't score enough goals. So having another player and he's got a point to prove, because let's be fair, obviously he tore it up in League One, in League Two, and then League One. He's come into the Championship, and it's not been quite as easy for him as it was, early at the first half of the season. He obviously had the injury at Stockport, which delayed his move to City because he was recovering from that. Now he's had this injury. So he's going to come, you'd like to think he'll come back with the bit between his teeth, determined to try and make an impact. So that is, look, the more players they've got in attacking, because I feel like defensively they're relatively settled, they're relatively solid for the most part. They've got a lot of options defensively. I think Charlie Hughes was exceptional on Saturday. His one blemish was that you remember that, Burnsy, first half, he was on the edge of his box, our side. You were in the same position.
The ball run.
Yeah, and
he let the ball run, and Armstrong was behind him, and he had to foul Armstrong on the angle of the box. And yeah, I'm impressed with him. I'm enjoying watching him. He's a no nonsense defender, but does have skill. He makes the odd mistake, as he did on Saturday, but they all do. But you can see the potential in him, and he's obviously a cult hero already. The fans love him to bits, and his partnership with Alfie Jones. Alfie's is a quiet sort of player, but I personally think he's had a really good season. Alfie, I'm an admirer. I've always been an admirer. It's a nice partnership, and it's coming together nicely. So hopefully there's a development in they can play together and develop that partnership as the season goes on and hopefully into next season. Nigel asks us a question on the 1904 club. And Nigel says, with a recent upturn in home form, can we win all the rest of our home games? I don't see why not, says Nigel, with the momentum, new confidence at the MKM. Coventry will be a tricky one, though, in Nigel's opinion. That's been moved to a Monday night, hasn't it, for the Sky cameras? I think the Coventry game. I think it's a fair thing, and I do think that's part of the confidence that they don't look a relegation side, and that you'd fancy the chances of staying up, because they appear to have sorted out the home hoodoo. I don't want to talk too early, but given they've won the last two at home, you think, aye, they've cracked it. It's not a monkey on the back now. They've managed to get that off, and hopefully that will continue. Kathyrn, you got a thought on it?
Yeah, and they're beating teams that they need to beat at home as well, and that's the important thing. Plymouth and Oxford were both games against teams that they needed to pick up 3 points against. And there's more, we mentioned Coventry is probably the most difficult one at home that's left, but there's still some games that you're looking at. We mentioned earlier, obviously, Luton and Derby being two of them. And I think if they win both of those games, they go a long way to staying up, and it's just about trying to pick up another 3 points from somewhere else. But I'm trying to remember who else they've got to play at home alongside Coventry, Luton and Derby. Preston.
Yeah.
Again, Preston, by that point in the season when they come, obviously whether they get through in the FA Cup remains to be seen. You'd probably expect an Aston Villa to win, but never say never. Regardless, you're probably thinking Preston's season's done by that point, and they're playing for pride probably by the time they come to the MKM, which can sometimes make teams more dangerous. I know it depends kind of which way it swings. Sometimes teams actually, when they've not got any pressure on of playing anything, can turn up and get a result you're not expecting them to. And sometimes they can be kind of one mind on, where they're going on holiday in the summer. So I do think the home games that we've got are all winnable. The Coventry one will be difficult, but sometimes teams in the playoffs at that point of the season, they can get the jitters a little bit. I mean, Coventry lost last week to Cardiff, didn't they? So not Cardiff, Derby. So clearly they've got that kind of result in them as well.
I think the thing with the home form is that, as you say, Burnsy, it was really important to get that Plymouth win, and then the manner of the way they fought back against Oxford to win as well. That no longer are we, obviously the home form over the season has been horrendous, but if you take the last two results, I think that's a real positive, and I think that sets them up. Imagine if they'd have gone into the Luton game without winning Plymouth, without beating Plymouth or Oxford. The pressure on that would be unbelievable. I mean, there's still going to be a lot of pressure on it anyway, but the fact they've been able to win a couple of games, I think they can now relax a bit more. I think everybody, the fans included, can relax a little bit more now they've won a couple of games. And you look at the home games coming up, they are okay. They are, and they've got the power with the Luton game and the Derby game to take points off teams directly below them. I also saw something a couple of days ago that apparently statistically City have the easiest run in the Championship. Now that is dangerous, of course, and at this stage of the season, everything's all over the place, so you're never quite sure what you're going to get with anybody. But on paper, and that's what we're going off right now, on paper at least, they've got a run in that they haven't got to play bar Coventry, as Kathyrn says. Bar Coventry, they've not got to play anybody that's really in the playoff race. Watford and Sheffield Wednesday realistically aren't going to get in the playoffs, so they're kind of in that middle ground area. But it is Coventry is the one, and by that point, who knows? Who knows where Coventry will be at? Who knows where City will be at? So many things can change between now and when Coventry come.
This from Ash Hagar says to the 1904 club, great point on the road at West Brom. Luton at home is another must-win. Have to be on it these last 8 games. No room for any mistakes, and has sent us a praying hands emoji. So Ash is not relaxing yet, which I think is probably the right thing. And this might lead us on to some more discussion points, because I know this was on your list. Baz, this comes from Joe Moore to the 1904 club. 1, Kamara is beginning to deliver. 2, jury's still out on Joseph. Pedro is miles ahead of anyone else up top, including Crooks. 3, Gelhardt has to play in the 10 role, much less effective out wide. And 4, Maka has surprised many. I know you wanted to talk about Abu Kamara, didn't you, Baz?
Yeah, I just think look, by his own admission, he's had a really difficult season. The move from Norwich was tough. He obviously came into a thing that wasn't going so well. He was hauled off at half-time on his debut. He's had problems off the field as well, issues off the field as well, which he's had to deal with, which I think sometimes goes unnoticed in football. We just expect the players to be robots and deliver every single week. And sometimes we don't appreciate that actually they are human beings and they have, issues like the rest of us off the field that can affect them.
But we don't. But the thing is, from that point of view, from a fan's point of view, you don't necessarily know what's going off the field, do you? Unless somebody comes out publicly and say, "Well, this is going on in my life," etc., which we're not necessarily expecting them to do. But and you don't know that. So did he?
Yeah. Well, he did that rather bizarre press conference before the Leeds game where him and Ruben sat together. And he sort of said, I've had some. It was after that really innocuous post on his mate at Portsmouth after really like why is that even an issue? But anyway, it was apparently an issue. They wanted to deal with it. He scored 2 goals against Leeds, but I think genuinely his performances have improved massively. I think he's looked much better, more comfortable. He's having an impact, and I thought. Look, Ruben's been criticised once or twice for his slow changes since he's been here. But the last couple of games, his changes have been at the perfect time and made massive difference. And it was again when Kamara and Palmer came off the bench at West Brom. I've made no secret of the fact that I like Kamara. I get that his languid, laissez-faire style attitude can sometimes send out a message that perhaps he doesn't care as much or he's not as bothered, which is not the case. That's just how he is. Not all players are going to tear around, slide into tackles, throwing their arms in the air to G the fans up. That's just not. Everybody's different, and his style is quite languid. And there's been times this season where he's let himself down. He should have stopped the cross at Burnley, for example. He didn't. For me, he didn't work hard enough to stop that cross coming in from Jadon Anthony that Zian Fleming scored from. But I do think he is still a young player. He's still only 21. It's been a difficult season for him and for Hull City with all the change and everything that's going on. I just think he's getting better. And I think between now and the end of the season, he will be a crucial part of it. Go on.
The point I was going to make, he does have quite a languid looking style, but that doesn't mean he's working hard or anything. I like him. I'd make 2 points on him. One, and it might have been in the first game against West Brom earlier in the season. Apologies if I've got that wrong, but there was a time when he saved a certain goal where he'd come from out on the left wing in his own half in a sort of defensive position to get back, to show the desire to get back and help out the defence, and cleared one on the line. He came from nowhere to clear one on the line. It might have been against West Brom. It might have been against somebody else. And I thought the goal on Saturday was a Muck and Nettles goal, wasn't it? I mean, he was going in amongst a lot of bodies to get his head on it. And, an almost old-fashioned striker's goal, that getting in, get your head in amongst the boots and nod it home. I like him. I definitely think he's a player. You think back to João Pedro's goal at Bristol City, which was beautiful. Just the economy of effort and the quick ball from Kamara on the crossfield ball from Puerta, just volleyed the little pass in, found his teammate. He's he is getting better, but I've always, and I know some people get sick of the phrase, there is a player in there. I've always felt there was a player in there, and he's come in good. Though interestingly, he didn't start on Saturday. I might have thought he would have stayed in the team, and Joseph might have been the one to come out of the starting lineup. But I think he likes him for his all-action work rate and pressing on away defences.
I think on that was Ruben said that was tactical. That he felt that the setup he went with was better to start the game, and then bring Kamara off the bench, potentially with West Brom tiring, third game in a week. Tony Mowbray was keen to point out, obviously they in the last couple of weeks they've gone to Leeds, they were at Burnley on Tuesday night, so they did have 24 hours longer to recover than City did. But yeah, Ruben did say it was tactical to get Kamara off the bench in the second half and go at them, and it worked. I do think he'll want that chance back when he went through. And he made it for me a bit too easy for Wildsmith to save. He should have scored. For me, he should have scored that. But he's getting in the positions, and City are getting him in the positions. I just think he's a player that can make a difference. A bit like Casey, that he's a bit unpredictable, and I think sometimes he surprises himself. But he's got undoubted talent. It's just Ruben and his coaching staff. Toby, James Oliver Pearce, and Dawes getting the best out of him. Kathyrn, where are you at with Abu?
I think he's improved massively in the last couple of months, and Ruben says he's got a good record of working with young players. He did it at Reading. I think what he's getting out of Kamara and what he's getting out of Joe Gelhardt, who's had a couple of really unsuccessful loan spells, I think that kind of shows. I think that's credit to the manager as well, partly, and that's why I would I would say to be patient with someone like Kyle Joseph, who's still making the step up from the league below. He's just going to need time, I think, and I think once he gets a goal, it might set him on a run. I think he just needs that goal probably, and he's probably had a few chances where maybe he should have got it, but you can't fault his work rate, and he certainly does a job when he's in the team. So I think the three of them, under Ruben Sayers' management, have been really, really good. And I think we've kind of said all season, haven't we, about Kamara and that there's definitely talent in there. It's just about getting the best out of him. And I think maybe we forget that he's still only 21 and that he's still learning things. And he quite clearly had a difficult time under the previous manager. And now he looks like he's got his confidence back. I mean, he probably would have had another goal against Oxford if Puerta had squared it to him, but in the end, Puerta did score. So you kind of can't really complain, but I think he was probably screaming at him to pass him the ball. It was just been a shame that we've been without João Pedro for these games, because I thought the two of them were really kind of starting to link up and build a partnership. They combined against Plymouth, combined against Bristol City, and it's been a shame that's been disrupted for 3 games. But when he comes back, I think they can, continue to build on that as well.
The other thing with Abu scoring on Saturday, it was Saturday, it now means that Hull City's second top goal scorer is no longer own goals, because it means that Kamara's now gone on to 4 goals, and own goals are now on 3, along with Chris Bedia. Which I guess highlights where City are at in terms of goals this season. Right, I want to finish with kind of like a double-edged topic, really. Given the fact that we're now into an international break, and it gives us time to maybe reflect on a few things. It's what we make of Ruben Sayers so far, and to coin one of Prutz's beloved phrases, it dovetails nicely into what we were talking about before we came on about the reasons to be optimistic for next season, as daft as that sounds, when City is still in the relegation battle and could get relegated this season. So if we look at Sayers so far, Kathyrn, we'll start with you. 19 league games in charge, 7 wins, 7 defeats, 5 draws, 22 goals scored, 20 conceded. I think in the form table since his first game, which was that 1-1 draw against Watford, where they really should have won but conceded late, I think they'd be 10th. I think they'd be 10th with something like 26 points from those games, which over the course of the season would give them about 60, 62, 63. So kind of not close enough to the playoffs to be in the playoffs, but kind of in the periphery. If you look back on given what he inherited, all the problems, the team, no confidence at the bottom end of the table, couldn't score, loads of injuries, in terms of Miller and Bellumi at least, and Zambrano suspended. How do you assess the impact that Ruben's had both on the pitch, and importantly in the stands as well, because the fans have been really well behind him?
Yeah, I think when you think about what he walked into, it's never easy to come into a team midway through a season, but the negativity that he walked into, both in the dressing room and in the stands, I think you have to commend him for the job that he's done. Like, he's not been perfect. There's been some poor games in there as well as the fantastic wins. But I think if we'd had him from the start of the season, I don't think we'd be in a relegation battle right now. I think we'd be comfortably mid-table. So that's what gives you the optimism. If you are thinking about next season, the players seem to really like him. They're playing for him. And I think his style of play they're getting better at kind of playing the way he wants to. And the more time he has to work with them, you think about him having a pre-season with the team, you'd be excited about what what could potentially come. He's still learning as a manager. He's still quite early on in his career as well. But I think he's done a brilliant job, and it's just a shame that he wasn't somebody that they went for in the summer, because it's always difficult, as you say, coming to a team midway through a season, trying to get in and just make sure you get points on the board while also trying to get your style and tactics across to players. Like I say, if he'd been there from the summer, I don't think we'd be in the position that we are now.
And Burnsy, I know there's some people have contacted us over time and said, we're really kind of loving Sayers, and we're hypercritical of Tim Walter before him, and we don't give enough credence to Walter, the situation that Walter had to deal with, which I actually disagree with. I think we've said pretty much from the moment Walter was given the job that it was a difficult scenario with the players leaving, the gaps he had to fill, the late recruitment, obviously injuries. But so it's difficult to make a comparison necessarily between Walter's 16 or 17 games and Sayers' 19, because Sayers inherited a team midway through the season that had been playing a very different style. And obviously, they clearly weren't happy. That's not my narrative. That's what the players have said themselves. So he inherited a really difficult situation. How do you kind of square that circle and look at where the progress they've made and the job that he's done, which goes into the feeling that actually with the recruitment, some of the recruitment they've done this with in terms of like Hughes and Murtaza, they've got Miller Ballooney coming back at some point. The basis for a squad is there over the summer that can be positive. You can be positive about next season if they survive this.
Indeed, and as I said earlier in the show, I found myself sort of saying it publicly in the commentary on Saturday. You could look ahead to next season with optimism, and then I thought I had to stop myself. I thought, don't be an idiot. This is, it's the Championship. This is far from over, and especially when you look at the table at the end of the day and think, oh, hold on a minute, they've played really well there. They've got a good point at a playoff chasing side, and they're actually nearer the relegation zone than when they started the day. So you've got to temper it. What I think is I watch his side, and at no point have I thought, what the chuffing hell are you doing that for? As I did with Tim Walter at times, I'm thinking, what's he doing? Why are you playing in that manner? Why have you got 4 people lined up the left side all in a line so there's no angles? I don't think that with Ruben Sayers. I think, there's no square pegs in round holes or anything like that. People are fitting in the right places. And I think he's done a good job. He was mentioned, and I'm trying to think it's at the other end of the table. He got a little mention in the Sunday Times yesterday in the sports section. It wasn't an analysis of him. They were talking about coaching and things like that, but there was a little mention of him yesterday, just as an example. And I like what he's doing. It's unfussy and it's effective though, because the form is good. He's getting results in what were trying circumstances. A lot of players coming in January to get them to fit and to gel and what have you. And credit to the players for that. By and large, he's getting a tune out of all of them that have come in. And I just think it feels more together now. And he's got to take a lot of credit for that. And the players have got to take credit. They bought into it. And for those trying to make the comparison, it was a tough gig for Tim Walter. It was a tough gig. And, there is a certain amount of sympathy, but I don't think he helped himself to endear himself to the players or the fans in what he did. But that's gone now. And Ruben Sayers is building a side. He's got to make sure he keeps the team in the Championship. But given what we've seen so far from him and the team, he's every chance of doing that. Fingers crossed.
And I think, Kathyrn, that's the crux of it, isn't it? That I referenced it on Sunday that the fans at the end of the game were chanting, "We are staying up," and that wasn't taking anything for granted at all. I know, but the point I was trying to make, and may have made it badly, but the point I was trying to make was the fact that for the first time this season, the fans, genuinely believe in the manager and the players. There's been a lot of criticism for the players at times this season. Much of it has been justified. Some of it a bit unjustified and a bit over the top at times. But particularly, I'm thinking of Louis Coyle, and even Alfie Jones at times. But the fans can see there's a logic to what's being done. That the players are buying into it. You don't go to Bristol City and play for 87 minutes with 10 men and get a point. If the players aren't buying into it, they don't go to West Brom, go 1-0 down with the ability potential of capitulating there, come back and get a point, and various others. Yes, there's been 1 or 2 results we know that haven't been great. Cardiff but the response since Cardiff, and that's what it's about. No team's perfect. You're always going to have setbacks, and it's always about how you respond. It's a cliche, but it's true that it's about how you respond. And since the Cardiff game, they've gone 4 unbeaten, winning 2 and drawing 2. So that connection with the supporters, they chant his name every home game. They chant his name away. The fans are singing about Alzate. They're singing about Kamara. They're singing about Joe Gowhart because he's been fantastic. There is a connection, isn't there, between the supporters, which is quite rare when a team are at the bottom end of the table that they are and fighting to stay in the league.
I think there's a belief in the squad and in the stands now that they're going to get themselves out of it, and I think that's really key. And I think Ruben Sayers has brought that connection between the fans and the players back. I think it was broken under the previous manager, and part of that was down to him, and part of it, you look at the players as well. We have criticised Tim Volter a lot, and I think justifiably so. But I do think some of the players would probably admit themselves earlier in the season that they weren't quite at the levels maybe that they should have been at. But there's just more togetherness about the whole club, I think, now. And, the manager has to take a lot of responsibility for that. And I think he just understands the fans a little bit more. He's been in English football for a long time. I think maybe that was part of the problem with the previous manager, is that there was maybe a barrier there slightly in terms of the real, what fans expect and what they want from their team. I think Ruben Sayers just gets it a little bit more, and maybe that's because he's been in a situation at Reading which was really difficult, and he's had experience of having to keep a team in a division in much worse circumstances than the one he's come into. When you think about kind of his past management, he's probably had actually a lot tougher circumstances than the one he finds himself in now. So I think that's probably put him in good stead for coming into a team that's been battling relegation and had so much negativity, that he's been at a club like Reading where he's not even had the ownership. There's been, at least with City, there might have been a little bit of criticism over signings and how the summer went, but the ownership and the fans is very much kind of, a positive relationship, pretty much as you can have in football. He had the opposite at Reading, so at least he's not had that as a kind of a potential problem as well. So I just think he gets it a little bit more, and he has to take a big, credit for the job that he's done. But he'll only take that, obviously, fully if he manages to keep the team up. So he's still got a job to do.
Absolutely. And I think on that bombshell, he's still got a job to do. Is a fitting way to end today's show. Burnsy, thank you very much for joining us. As always, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. And for me, I'm now going to try and walk across the kitchen floor covered in treacle. Not me covered in treacle, the floor covered in treacle, and see whether I can make it in my socks.
Brilliant.
Shoehorn that in.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I enjoyed that. I might even plagiarise that and steal that. Kathyrn, thank you so much as always.
Fantastic. I hope someone's going to film you, Burnsy, when you try doing that. That would go viral on TikTok.
Burnsy on TikTok. Now, that's something I'd love to see.
No, that's not happening. It's not happening.
You bottled it. It again. Right, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Keep your questions and your comments coming at the 1904 Club. International break, so no football for City until the 29th of March. But of course, we'll have plenty for you over the next few days. And we'll be back again soon with the next episode of the 1904 Club podcast even. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody.